this path that I tread, I can't make it on my own, but I'm glad I have you, my companion to lean on. When I fall, you are there, guiding me and giving care. You're a blessing indeed beyond compare. I thank the Lord I have someone with whom I can pursue, one who cares to understand what my life is going through. What a privilege, with companions I can pray, and together we will serve God all our days. Look ahead to the prize, with endurance run the race. Hand in hand to the end, we can make it by God's grace. I just love spending time with you, friend, to fellowship. I do treasure our true companionship. I thank the Lord I have someone with whom I can pursue, one who cares to understand what my life is going through. What a privilege, with companions I can pray, and together we will serve God all our days. Preach the word, testify, with our friends the gospel share. Don't be scared, speak the truth, and together we declare. Later on we will see, one by one they will be saved. God is with us, He is one with us, be brave. I thank the Lord I have someone with whom I can pursue, one who cares to understand what my life is going through. What a privilege, with companions I can pray, and together we will serve God all our days.
Good morning, friends. A very happy New Year to you. And so today we are on the 7th day of our retreat program. And the theme I have chosen for today is Companions in Mission. So I will propose some reflections as usual, and you're welcome to listen and then absorb it and then think over it during the day. To go back to the life of Ignatius, which I have already been linking, as we have already seen, Ignatius started his new life after his Pamplona fight and the healing wounds and so on as a pilgrim, as he referred to himself, because his aim was precisely to go to Jerusalem on pilgrimage to walk in the footsteps of Jesus, and if possible proclaim the gospel in Jerusalem itself. He wanted to stay there so that he can somehow experience Jesus there where Jesus lived and worked. But then, of course, that was not possible because there were people in control and they did not like pilgrims to stay long there. So Ignatius had to come away, so to speak. But then, instead of finding Jesus, say, in Jerusalem, what happens is that now he finds Jesus, the whole cosmos. And therefore, he himself does not go around the world, but his companions eventually today become, they go all over the world precisely to walk in the footsteps of Jesus and to proclaim Jesus and so on, to encounter Jesus, God everywhere. So in this kind of a universal movement, the focus of Ignatius was not on kind of building a monastery, having a community of like the Benedictines and the other orders earlier, and to pray together and so on and so forth, but rather to go out on mission even individually and proclaim Christ in an informal way. And therefore, but in this sense, let us say the pilgrimage of Ignatius, which was first to Jerusalem to encounter Jesus, now it becomes the whole universe. And therefore, the companions go all over the world and try to proclaim and discover Jesus everywhere. In that sense, also the pilgrimage is no longer an individual's pilgrimage, but a communal pilgrimage, not necessarily all walking together to the same goal, but rather dispersed across the world, but involved in the same mission of proclaiming Jesus. So that's a kind of a cosmic pilgrimage, I would call it. So in this sense, let us say the Ignatius and his friends, they make up a community. Community, of course, is when people come together like that, following a vocation. This has been the dimension of religious life in the past, starting with St. Benedict onwards, 3rd, 4th centuries. And somehow or other, the whole focus of the religious life was a community. People living together and, let us say, praying 4 or 5 times a day together and working together, eating together. So somehow or other, the focus was on the community to which the group belonged, and focusing on, of course, God, Jesus, and so on, spiritual life, helping each other, etc. But the companions of Ignatius was not keen on staying together and living together, but rather go out on mission and go out wherever there was need. This was the condition under which, let us say, Ignatius and his companions presented himself to Pope Paul III, and precisely Pope Paul III approved this orientation, and therefore they were ready to go anywhere. They were supporting each other in a sense that they formed a community, but not a community that was staying together in a house, in a convent, in a monastery, and so on. The only link among them eventually, of course, was on the one hand, let's say, obedience. That there is a coordinator called the superior, or whatever name you give to him. And therefore, so the community ideal is there, that they are together as working together for the same goal, but in a sense dispersed across the world. And that dispersion gives them a certain freedom of movement, the freedom of choosing what they want to do, where they want to be, etc. And therefore, the real need is a mutuality, a fellowship, rather than a hierarchy. And therefore, in that sense, let us say, there is a new kind of a community, if you like. And so this is what I would call religious companionship oriented to mission. So therefore, it is true that, let's say, the earlier St. Benedict onwards, they also were focusing on this fellowship, common life. They're focusing much more on common life and prayer, though they did some apostolate, which came as an addition. But for Ignatius, the apostolate was primary, and the communion of companions being together, or let us say linked together, was simply a support, so to speak. So if in this sense, for instance, let us say he sends St. Francis Xavier. Of course, 2 of them were supposed to go, then one got sick, and then Francis Xavier came in. Then another one stayed in Goa, but then Francis Xavier, in a way, covers the whole of Asia, goes up to Japan, and all by himself. So therefore, the focus was really on mission, and yet the link was kept up precisely through the letters. Those days, a letter from Francis Xavier might take months to arrive in Rome, and yet that was the only communication they had. And therefore, this became, if you like, a new form of religious life, which many congregations that come afterwards eventually follow this kind of an organization that Ignatius had. Though many congregations of women religious, they still prefer the communities, because it provides the community living together, does provide them a safety, which perhaps the males do not really need that much. They are much more free to go around. So from this point of view, let us say what we have to observe today is the sense of communion. The church is not an autocracy, governed by the Pope representing Jesus Christ and so on, who is Lord of everything, etc. It is not a democracy either that runs by majority, but it is a consensual group of people who are together, who share with each other, but at the same time involved in the same ministry. Now, this should be true also of the religious communities and so on. But unfortunately, the whole thing developing in Rome, so to speak, somehow gets involved in the Roman structures of hierarchy, of control. And somehow or other, the church, at least the Roman church, has taken over that model. And though there are eventually some congregations that try to get out of it and insist more on the community than hierarchy, superior, etc. So in that sense, let us say the organization there is it is more not living together, but is rather working, sharing the same kind of work wherever it may be. And then the leader is not kind of a is more a kind of a coordinator or a supporter than a kind of a manager. So it is a kind of a group in which, in a sense, all are equal, but then there is someone who is the center of this unity, the primacy more of honor than really of power, which assures a certain personal freedom. So this is what I would call communion and not a community. Therefore, we all pursue a common goal, but not necessarily a common ministry. And of course, there may be a leader according to need once again. But then living together is not a priority for us in a way. But being linked to each other, that is a priority. So from this point of view, see, we can have a kind of a Christian vision of from the point of view of Jesus. How do we look at it? And for that, we can go back to, let's say, today, for instance, we can take up chapter 15 of the Gospel of St. John, where precisely, let us say, Jesus tells them, love one another as I have loved you. He says that to the disciples gathered together. It's a day before he goes on to his passion. And he tells them, this is my new commandment, my only commandment, love one another as I have loved you. And on that particular day, the last day of his life, by his actions, he also shows concretely what does it mean to love one another. First of all, he starts the day, that evening, if you like, washing the feet of the disciples. So to love one another really means to serve each other, to be at the service of each other. It is not to be served, but to be at the service of others. Therefore, it's also a sense of mutual humility, if you like, not mutual domination, but mutual humility. There is no competition, that each one is ready to serve the other, and also others, not only of the companions, also serve the people around. Therefore, the service is the basic goal, if you like, that somehow gives them a common orientation. And secondly, the second element of this community, of course, is sharing. And that's what he does, obviously. Let us say when the disciples come together and Jesus breaks bread and offers the bread, pass on to them, saying, this is my body, and then also shares the wine as my blood, etc. So in that sense, let us say sharing also food and everything, that becomes the second element of the community which Jesus, let us say, inaugurates, so to speak. And the third element, of course, is that he gives up his own life. So sacrifice. So therefore, the community that Jesus wants to build, that Ignatius wants to imitate, is precisely a community that is characterized by service, sharing, and self-gift. I think these are the three words that we have to keep in mind: service, sharing, self-gift. This is what creates a community, not all kinds of other structures and so on. Not structures and etc. They may be necessary, obviously, but they're not the main thing. But this idea of sharing, self-gift, this is the basic thing, and service, this is the basic thing that is necessary. And of course, this can be expressed in a variety of charisms, as we find, for instance, if you read the letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 12 and 13, that there are various charisms but eventually there's only one goal and one means, that is the link of all these charisms, which is precisely is loving one another and loving God in the other and loving the others in God, so to speak. So this is the kind of love one another as I have loved you. This is the basic goal around which this community is built, this common task is being built. So therefore, there is always, if you like, in practice, when the community is working together, a tension between a common task and a common life. So, but what we focus on precisely, as we find in the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 2 and 4, that eventually, let us say, we pool together all our resources, not merely material, also physical or mental resources of our work, etc., etc. And then it's all shared according to need of the place, need of the persons, need of the community in which we are living. Therefore, we're always at the service of others, not for ourselves, but for the sake of the community. So therefore, this is the kind of a basic kind of a thing that we have to. So therefore, what we really need is to so therefore we have to build communion, and a communion, of course, supposes not uniformity. There may be rich diversity of talents, of responsibilities, and so on and so forth. But what we need is basically a basic sense of equality, and yet not sameness, but having certain basic rights and duties, but ultimately mutual recognition, mutual respect, mutual acceptance, a certain availability, a certain sense of responsibility for the collective community, a certain accountability to each other. So therefore, and when there is necessary, there's also a possibility of a common discernment. We are undertaking a new project, for instance. There is a lot of communication between the people. There is a certain amount of confidentiality, at the same time transparency. There's no hidden agenda. Therefore, there's a whole lot of characteristics which is focused on precisely the sense of community, of sharing, of fellowship, of participation, and not any kind of a hierarchy, domination, control, etc., etc. It is not like kind of a military group, but rather a sense of people working together, involved in a common project. So therefore, there is a society that is equal. There is no, like, for instance, suppose we take in India. In India, sometimes we think that the caste system is designed in such a way that there is a division of labor, and yet that is very unequal. No, the society is very unequal. There's a division of labor, yes, but there is no commonality, there is no community. Whereas here, whatever may be the job we are doing, they are doing it together as a community, and there is a real fellowship, etc. And therefore, the sense of communion, of equality, and so on becomes important. So in this sense of building community, what is important is obviously the common life. Common life where people live together, either in the same community, the same house, or in a particular area, in a town or in a region, etc. And except for reasons of age, health, and so on, there are no preferences, no privileges. There is no individualism. There is no groupism. There is no discrimination. I know I'm sure you recognize all these words: individualism, groupism, discrimination, which we do find even in groups that religious communities and so on, in which we have lived, etc., etc. But all this we should put away with. And what is there is precisely collaboration, participation, communion. This must be the kind of ideal that animate us. And so therefore, if the focus precisely is on work, on mission, or on going out for ministry, and yet being linked together, and the focus is not on community life as such, staying together and living together in the same community, then elements like common prayer, praying together. So the Benedictines come together and pray together 4 or 5 times a day, say the office together, or we insist upon common recreation. People all come together to relax, etc., etc., and we celebrate life in various ways and so on. This all can be useful when it can be done, but this is not seen as an essential part of life. The essential part of our life is precisely to be on mission, to be in the field working. And when we come together, we do celebrate life together. But the focus is not on common celebration, but focus on individual apostolate ministry, where even if we are working together as a group, the focus is on the work that you are doing and not on the common life that you are living. And so this, therefore, we have to kind of always balance the apostolic interest, apostolic involvement, and collaboration. So eventually, let us say, what is important is not personal benefit, but rather not personal benefit, but rather our being together. Our being together is only helpful for our individual ministry, so to speak. And the superior is there always as a unifying link. So once again, sometimes accustomed to a different kind of a hierarchical setup that we have in the church, somehow the superior becomes somehow above the others, who controls others. But that is not the ideal in the common life of the Jesuits. The superior is there more as a facilitator, as a coordinator, who listens to everyone and then see what is best and then chooses and so on, helps to discern, who guides discernment and so on and so forth. Therefore, it's not so much who is a superior is not somehow above the others, but a superior is one among other people, but his task is to coordinate. And therefore, there's a certain amount of equality, if you like. But unfortunately, in practice, what happens, of course, is the superiors behave as really people who have authority and who have power and so on and so forth. There's always this possibility of following wrong models that we take from the political life, or we take even from the ecclesiastical hierarchy, etc., etc. Whereas the community, the common life of the Jesuits particularly, is not that kind of a hierarchical community, but it is rather a community of fellowship, a community of equals, a community of people working together for a common cause, or doing different things on a common mission and so on. So this kind of a sensitivity, I think we have to develop and somehow focus ourselves more and more on that. So what are the means by which we can build up this kind of community? How can we really be companions in mission? How can we be companions, for instance, when Francis Xavier was in India and going off to Japan, and Ignatius is sitting in Rome, and yet they belong to the same company? How do you understand that? So I think in the time of Ignatius, this was assured precisely by the writing of letters. So one of the important things that Ignatius wanted and demanded from the missionaries precisely is letters. I mean, it's not that today we can sit in a computer and send an email or more than one email every day. It's not that. Those days, if Ignatius, if Francis Xavier wrote a letter from Goa, it might take 3 months, 4 months to reach Rome. But still, there was a communication, and therefore the communication through letters was the kind of a means by which Ignatius tried to build the community. Today, of course, let's say this possibility of contact is much more now because of the media. You can just pick up the phone and get in touch with somebody, or we have the email, or we can have a let's say a conference, what you call over the net, where I can even see each other and talk, etc. Today, all this is possible, but still, once again, here what is important is this idea of communication, of getting in touch, of reporting what you are doing, sharing your work, and therefore maybe getting the advice of others and discussing, etc., etc., etc. So this is a more a sense of equality of fellowship than a hierarchy. I think this somehow or other we should get into that this system is possible and this can work together. This has worked well in the past. It can work well on the future, and somehow or other take our minds away from a certain hierarchical setup with which were which we are familiar in politics, also in the church, with the Pope, bishops, and the clergy, and so on and so forth. We don't have that kind of hierarchy in the society. So with all the facilities today, this communication is much more, this fellowship is much more possible today. Even in the time of Ignatius, as Superior General, he didn't have computers, he didn't have fax machines, whatever, and yet he seems to have, if you calculate the number of letters he wrote as a general in the 10 years he was general, he was writing on an average 10 letters a day, precisely because communication was important. And therefore, and he also encouraged the people to write letters to the superiors, to others, etc. And very often what happened, when the letters came, he used to collect information and then pass it around to other communities, so that all people know what is happening and what is going on, etc. So what happens, of course, is that that we have communities today possible, and then we have, and today, let's say, the networking is much more possible and convenient because of all the mass media and so on. But then it all depends with what goal are we using this media. Now, I can send emails. I can send I don't know, as many emails I want, or today I can send an email to 100 people at the same time, putting their addresses and so on. But we have to ask ourselves now, for what and in what way I am using the communication. Is it simply serving a kind of a self-publicity, or am I doing it for mission, to promote, to encourage others, to inform others, to get encouragement from others, etc. Therefore, is the communication simply a communication to be together, or is it also focused on mission? I think that's what is important. At the same time, the communication also should not be such that it somehow restricts the freedom of the people in mission, where they still feel free under the Spirit to do God's work, though the superior or others are always kept informed of what that person is doing. Therefore, how do you combine, if you like, a certain freedom for mission, at the same time a certain need for communication, fellowship, networking, etc. And once again, as I say, don't look at it hierarchically, but in a way of fellowship level, at the level of friendship, at the level of communications, and a horizontal level, not so much vertical level, etc. As I said, today we have, instead of letters, we have phones, we have WhatsApp, we have webinars, we have emails, we have conference calls, etc., etc. The possibilities are much more, and therefore, but then we have to use it. What is the goal of using it? Is it simply sort of be together, or eventually it is helping us to encourage us mutually, inform each other, and eventually focus on the mission? Of course, for this kind of a communication, there will always be obstacles of all kinds. That, of course, there is always a sense of egoism, that we want to be at the center, and therefore we speak much about ourselves. We don't listen to others that much. And then we are attached to particular projects, or we are prejudiced against some people and don't listen to them, or we want to have a sense of power. So all this can eventually, vitiate the kind of communications we want to have, and we have to be very careful. We had to be very careful that there is a real fraternal relationship in this communication. And of course, psychologically also, let us say, the communications are made use of, because we have got fears, we have got psychological needs of recognition, and therefore dependence, independence. So there are a lot of psychological problems that are involved in being a community, and we have to be very careful that we avoid all this and really make use of sharing communication, precisely focusing it on mission. This means that we have to be always be people who are open to listen, open to listen and understand, open to support, encourage, and occasionally also to correct if necessary. But ultimately, let us say once again, it's not a personal focus, but a common community focus, a mission focus. And at the same time, it should also be ready to receive this kind of remarks that are helpful and that majorly challenges to change, that our own selfishness, our individualism and so on does not come in between, and eventually we are focusing on the community. I think that is always necessary, etc. And unfortunately, let us say in the contemporary world, there will be a lot of groupisms based on maybe language, caste, community, nationality, and so on, especially when there are people from different parts of the world in particular groups and so on. And there's also sometimes a kind of in every group will be somebody who is always perfectionist, who always wants to do better, and then at least he thinks that his own ideas are better, and therefore a certain amount of lack of tolerance, criticism. So there are a lot of problems also that can hinder community. We are very careful about that. And here, eventually, let us say we can think of, for instance, the letter on obedience, which we all used to read in our novitiate days more than once, etc., where Ignatius was focusing on obedience. But then the focus on obedience was precisely to facilitate communication between people and not to impose anything on anybody. And it was written to the scholastics in formation and not necessarily to people who are. And then, of course, we always think of in this kind of a common working together, and then there are many people working together. Some differences, some conflicts, some tensions are inevitable. But then what can we do to make these conflicts creative? That we cannot fully avoid conflicts, and so far as there are many people, there will be difference of opinion and difference of, let's say, projects, difference of what you want to do, difference of goals, and so on and so forth. But then how we can make this through discussion, through sharing, through communication, through explaining what exactly you are doing to others and so on, being open, etc. How we can make even conflicts creative so that it helps us to go forward, to do better. And how to minimize, discount, if you like, personal factors or sometimes group factors that might be hindering our mission focus. And the mission focus is always based on truth and justice. So I think this is it's always a question of tension, because eventually when we live together, certain personal factors always enter in, and we have to be very, very, very careful. Therefore, the whole idea of, I think, the Ignatian examen of consciousness is precisely not so much to focus upon, I have done something wrong, etc., but rather, how have I interacted with the others during the day? What kind of my personality has come through? What kind of preferences do I have? What kind of orientations that I betray in the way I talk, in the way I relate to others, and so on? In what way I can do better to concentrate on mission, to help others, etc. I think this must be the focus of our examen of consciousness, not simply, looking at some minor faults. I shouted at somebody, or I got angry, or I did not do something that I should have done. Not that kind of, nitpicking, but rather how do I have related, how I have worked together. I think this is an important element, must be of our examen of consciousness at least once a day. At the end of the day, we sit back and really ask ourselves how have I done my work, not merely individually, but as a community, and how have I related to others, not only to other collaborators, also to the people for whom I have been working. And in cases, we also say, let's say, if we are really working together as a community, then we should feel free to ask for help if we need somebody's help. We should not be ashamed of accepting that we are not 100% perfect, that we don't have all the talents and things that we need, and that we can also learn from others. Others can help us. Others may see things better in a way that we who are involved in the project cannot see ourselves, or others have different talents. Therefore, this sense of companionship also goes with collaboration, sharing, helping each other, and so on and so forth, for which, of course, certain openness is necessary, an openness and readiness to accept comments, to accept advice, or to even ask for it. So therefore, and even the idea of a superior, the task of a superior is not to order people around, but rather how he can build a community and bring people to interact with each other and to help each other. Therefore, the role of a superior is to be a facilitator of community in the community, not to dominate, not to order around, not to control everything. I think somehow or other, I think we mix up, if you like, our image of a superior. Can we think of really the superior as basically a coordinator, a facilitator, not someone who is above, but someone who is with others and works with others together, promotes togetherness, fellowship, and so on and so forth. I think these are the areas in which we can really progress a little more, I think, the society as it is today. So at the end, I have given you some texts from the scriptures, which you can use. You can think about what I have been saying and examining yourself, your own relationship to the community, how you have lived together, and what kind of problem you have faced, and how you can do better, and so on. You can think of all this, but also, let us say, try to go back to these scriptural passages where, especially John chapter 15, for instance, or Matthew chapter 5, which is on the Beatitudes, or Acts 4, where you really see how the first community has been functioning, on 1 Corinthians 13, which is the whole Pauline discourse on love and what love means. The same thing also John. Therefore, you can use this text perhaps to think about, to inspire you, to ask yourself how I have been a member of the community, how I have been collaborating with others, and so on, and how we can do it better, precisely not for my own sake, but for the sake of mission in which we are involved. Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Morning, friends, and I wish you all a happy new year. Today, I would like to share with you a few helpful tips to make our prayer and meditation more effective. Also share with you certain problems that we face in our prayer life, and after which I will also propose a few gospel passages and methods to pray over those gospel passages. The first thing that we need to do is sit in a comfortable posture. That is the first step. That keep your spine erect. The next one is relax your body by becoming aware of each part of your body. That is the second step. And the third one is relax your mind by becoming aware of your breathing. So posture, relaxing the body, and relaxing the mind by becoming aware of your breathing. The next one, make your breathing process serene. Sometimes it could be a shallow breath or jerks breathing, but instead you make that very serene. And whenever there is a distraction, you just become an observer. There is a certain attitude we need to develop before we begin our prayer or meditation. Number one, don't expect anything dramatic to happen. Because if you're going to sit for meditation every day with an expectation, and if it doesn't happen, you're going to be disappointed and discouraged. So please do not expect anything to happen immediately. Definitely without your knowledge, there will be certain transformation taking place within you. Don't strain. That is the second attitude we need to develop. Trying hard to achieve something during meditation. Do not strain. Third one, do not rush. St. Ignatius talks about in annotation number 2, taste and relish. So, which means We don't have to finish all the points that Father has proposed during the day to live our community life meaningfully for the sake of the mission. Don't rush. The fourth thing is, don't cling to anything or reject anything. During your meditation, there will be always something happening. You don't have to cling or you do not have to reject. Just be an observer. That means to say, let go. The next thing is accept everything that arises during the meditation. It could be a negative thinking, it could be a positive thinking. Just allow things to happen. As and when it comes, be an observer and come back to your breathing and continue with your meditation or contemplation. Above all, important thing to keep in mind, be gentle towards yourself or with yourself. Very, very important. And what are the problems that we face during our meditation or in our prayer life? Certainly, if you're taking a posture sitting on the ground, any posture, that will be physical pain, which is part of the process. You need to be just aware of it. Your legs will become numb. That will become a source of distraction. But just be aware of it. If it is too much and that you cannot bear it, gently change your posture and continue with your meditation. The third one is very important, inability to concentrate. The concentration, ability to concentrate do not happen immediately. Maybe over the years, you will be able to concentrate. Every time your mind wanders, you need to be patient to bring back your mind to your breathing and continue with your meditation or contemplation or prayer. So be patient. And there will be boredom. Definitely there will be boredom because every day routine, you begin with the posture, you begin relaxing the body, you begin relaxing the mind, and maybe you are taking the same method of prayer that you are taking. There will be boredom. It is part of the process. There will be drowsiness, agitation. These are all part and parcel of our meditation. And because of which, there will be discouragement and disappointment because nothing special is happening. Why to go on doing the same thing? I better stop praying. Already we do not have sufficient time to pray. And in spite of that fact, you do not have sufficient time to pray. You manage to find and sit for your meditation, and then finally nothing special happens. So what do? Enough, I give up. But very important, develop determination. Patanjali in Yoga Sutra says, if you want to make progress in your spiritual life, develop your willpower. So very, very important, determine and tell yourself, I am going to sit for half an hour or 20 minutes and I am not going to move. And that's, Ignatius would call it agere contra. You feel like getting up earlier. If you have decided for 30 minutes, go on 35 minutes. Go against it, he would say. And then resistance to meditation. So these are a few things that we could keep in mind so that we are able to overcome and bring about certain transformation in our life. These things will help us. And what is it that we can use for our meditation today? Father has proposed John 15, 1 Corinthians 12 and 13 chapters. I suggest that you use the method that we already proposed, Lectio Divina, that you read the passage as and when a particular word or a particular verse appeals to you, stop reading and reflect on that word or a verse. And then after that, respond, speak to the Lord about what you have reflected. And then finally, remain in the presence of the Lord. That would what we call contemplation. Read, reflect, respond, and remain in the presence of the Lord. So John 15, 1 Corinthians chapters 12 and 13 will help us. And if you want, you could also add Act chapter 2 and 4. That is also a very good passage that Father talked about service, sharing, and self-gift that will help us to make it as our own. Also, for service, he proposed John 13, 1 to 16. Even though we have contemplated on this particular passage earlier, we could take it today because it will be very appealing. Service, how do I make my life more service-oriented? Father also talked about that could be John 13, 1 to 16, could be Ignatian contemplation. Talked about the obstacles. I suggest take Genesis 3, 5 to 7. How, when one in a community becomes very popular, there could be jealousy on the part of the other that could become an obstacle for the growth of the community, for the growth of the mission that the community is involved in. So these are few things that will help us. Apart from that, I also suggest that you take those questions which Father has proposed under the heading obstacles, so that you make these questions as part of our examination of consciousness. So as we begin the new year, these methods, he calls it link is love. That becomes central, our focus point for our ministries and for our community. And I'm sure the Lord will lead us. Thank you.